If you've ever walked around Rome, you've probably noticed something strange. Some of the streets, the really old ones, are still perfectly usable. A bit bumpy, sure, but they've survived for over 2,000 years. That's longer than most countries have ever existed. And it makes you wonder, how on earth did they build roads that could last that long? To figure that out, we need to go way back, to where roads weren't even roads yet. From the first dirt trails to the stone-paved highways of the Roman Empire, and all the way to the asphalt highways that we drive on today. Long before engineers existed, humans simply followed the easiest routes: riverbanks, ridgelines, and, of course, animal tracks. These weren't designed, they just happened as generations of feet and hooves wore down the earth. But then something revolutionary happened around 3000 BC, regarded as the biggest invention of them all: the wheel. Suddenly, walking paths weren't enough. Carts needed stable surfaces, not mud and definitely not sand. The birth of the wheel forced humanity to start thinking about roads. Technically, the earliest known paved roads appeared in Mesopotamia in around 4000 BC. Archaeologists have found streets lined with flat stones, primitive but purpose-built. And around 2600 BC in Egypt, workers built paved routes to haul massive limestone blocks from quarries to pyramid construction sites. These were not roads for comfort, they were logistical hacks for moving gigantic objects efficiently. It took a few millennia for empires to begin to realize that good roads weren't just for hauling rocks, they were for holding power. If you think about it, roads are not just about travel, they're about control. A good road network does three things that any empire or kingdom desperately needs. The first one is moving armies. In the ancient world, speed often meant survival. If an empire could move the soldiers faster than a rebellion could spread, it stayed alive. That's exactly why the Persian Royal Road was so powerful. Stretching from Sardis, modern Turkey, to Susa in Iran, around 2,700 kilometers long, it allowed couriers to cross the empire in just 7 days on horseback, a journey that would normally take 3 months on foot. So in short, good roads meant faster armies, and faster armies meant you stayed in charge. An efficient road network provided a second benefit: moving goods. Military power might build an empire, but economic power keeps it running. A solid road network meant trade could flow smoothly. Grain from Egypt, wine from Gaul, and silk from the East. For Rome, this was vital. Stone highways connected provinces to ports and cities, feeding a massive economy that relied on steady movement of goods and taxes. Merchants could travel safely, officials could collect tributes, and markets could thrive. Without good roads, the empire's economy would have collapsed. Not because people stopped trading, but because moving stuff would have taken too long and cost too much. Even today, the same logic holds. Nations with efficient road networks have stronger internal markets and supply chains. The third, and perhaps the most underrated benefit of a solid road system is communication. Before telegraphs, before the internet, messages moved on roads. In the Roman world, couriers on horseback carried military orders, imperial tax updates, etc. Milestones were placed every Roman mile, which is equivalent to 1.48 kilometers, so travelers always knew how far they were from the next town or posting stations. The more efficient the road system, the faster information could travel and the higher degree of control could be exerted. And speaking of Romans, they took the idea of road and turned it into a science. At its height, Rome maintained about 85,000 kilometers of road, enough to circle the earth twice. So what made them so good? Roman roads were not random piles of stones. They were layered systems, carefully engineered. At the base was the statumen, big flat stones forming a strong foundation. Above that, the rudus, smaller stones mixed with mortar, acting like a cushion. And then the nucleus, gravel and lime, compacted to seal the surface. And finally, the summum dorsum, a top layer of tightly fitted paving stones, so smooth that even 2,000 years later, you can still walk on some of them without tripping. But it wasn't just about materials. Romans really understood the concept of drainage. Their roads were slightly convex, so rainwater ran off the sides into ditches. They built on raised embankments to keep the road dry and stable. They also used curbstones to stop erosion and surveyed routes with astonishing precision, often building arrow straight lines across hills, valleys, and swamps. All of these made Roman roads durable. Some have lasted over 2,000 years. But why? Well, because they solved the same problem modern engineers still worry about: water. If water seeps in, the base erodes and the surface cracks and the road dies. Roman roads were left to crumble. Officials inspected them and legions repaired them. This was infrastructure as empire policy. With the fall of the Roman Empire, its roads didn't disappear overnight. Medieval travelers still walked the same routes, but without the empire's maintenance, many became rough tracks again, overgrown or turned into muddy trails. Still, they never really truly vanished, because once a good path exists, people keep using it. You can still trace Roman routes in modern Europe. The straight lines of highways in Italy, France, or Britain often follow the same logic. During the Middle Ages, Europe's road system was fragmented, as local lords and towns maintained only what they needed, so roads between villages were rough, often flooded, and unsafe. Yet in cities, something was starting to happen. Cobblestone streets began to appear, especially in places like Paris and Florence. These weren't for speed, they were for drainage and cleanliness, and for showing off civic pride. By the 1500s, Europe's economy was expanding again. Kings started to realize that better roads meant more taxes, and merchants realized that they could make more money if wagons didn't sink in mud. So the first state-sponsored road projects began to appear, especially in France and England. Then came the Industrial Revolution and the golden age of road engineering. A Scottish engineer named John Loudon McAdam changed everything. His method used layers of small, angular stone compressed into a smooth, durable surface. The key here was drainage and compaction, philosophy that went straight back to the Roman logic, but with lighter materials and cheap labor. It was revolutionary. For the first time since Rome, roads became systematic, national infrastructure again. Travel, mail, and trade all sped up dramatically. A journey from London to Edinburgh, which once took nearly 2 weeks, could be done in 3 or 4 days. By the late 1800s, engineers began mixing tar with crushed stone to seal surfaces and reduce dust, creating tarmac. Then came asphalt concrete, first laid in 1870 in Newark, New Jersey, smooth, dark, and built to handle the growing number of bicycles and soon after automobiles. By the early 20th century, asphalt had taken over cities worldwide. It was flexible, easy to repair, and perfect for cars. And just like that, the road went from being an imperial instrument of power to a democratic one, used by everyone, everywhere, every day.